Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Seekers of the Supernatural. I'm your moderator, Tony Sparrow, along with hosts Lorraine Warren and Ed Warren, and a special guest tonight, Mr. Rod Vesey. Rod, as you might recall on a previous show, had seen a ghost. Actually, he had seen two ghosts, right down on Route 59, passing Union Graveyard. And Rod did go into a little bit of discussion about that. But what we did and felt we'd do tonight was talk about the aftermath of seeing a ghost, how it affects one's life. And what I'd like to do is start out with Rod, if I could, and just ask Rod his thoughts, his feelings of the aftermath. And perhaps, Rod, you could preface it by that, again, with that sighting that you initially saw perhaps 7 years ago.
Well, it was, what I came to find out was the White Lady, what's called the White Lady now in Monroe, or of Easton. As you know, I was driving down, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and happened to see one figure to my right in my car. And then immediately after that, which lasted a second, in front of me I saw a figure of a woman, which passed through my car, and then continuing on, my side of the road turned a red color, and continuing on a little farther, everything disappeared.
How did you feel that night, and like just right after that? How did you feel about that?
I had intense sorrow, very heavy feeling in my chest, very sorrowful. Started sobbing for no reason. Got home extremely upset, woke my wife up. By this time it was about 1:30 in the morning. Explained it to her, and had that like trembling feeling. And that lasted for quite a while, I'd say months. Every time I would talk about the experience, that same feeling would, from being a perfectly jovial mood, if I started to talk about that, that same feeling would come back to me, that heaviness, the sadness. And
I just wanted to comment on that, Rod. The sadness that he felt that night, this is called radio telethesis. It means that he was picking up the emotions of the spirit. Now remember that the White Lady was on the road in front of him, about 40 foot, right? Right. And in a second or two, she came right through the car and passed right past Rod here. This is when he felt the feelings of this woman. She doesn't know what's happened to her. She's obviously earthbound. And when she tries to reach someone like myself, when I was filming her that night, what we refer to as black shadow ghosts push her away from anyone who might help her, especially towards Route 59 where Rod had his encounter with her. The man that he had experienced sitting alongside of him was later identified from his description of the man, what he was wearing and so forth, as a man by the name of Buddha, who had been murdered way back around the early 1930s. His body was thrown into the swamp in back of the church. The murderer, thinking that he weighted it down, it would stay down, but the gases from the body had brought it back up, and eventually he was caught and he was executed. So this is what the feelings were that Rod was feeling here.
Now, Rod, have you ever had an experience prior to that White Lady episode?
I had nothing like that, but back when I was about, it's been between 16 and 18, I'm embarrassed I can't remember the date now. A good friend of mine had died, and a couple nights after that, sitting in my bedroom, I saw the figure of a woman in front of my windows. So my bed was on this end of the room and my windows were there. And from the light coming in, I could see a woman sitting looking out my bedroom window, and where the window ended, that's where the figure ended. And I choose to believe that that was just a way of saying I'm okay, the person that I know.
Now you got to remember that if you knew Rod, you'd know that he's a very sensitive person.
So
a spirit will pick on a sensitive person because they can project their image to that individual clairvisually and clairaudiently. He being sensitive, using more than the 5 senses, it was easier to reach him. He has a love of nature, of animals and birds, very compassionate person. Now, if I were a spirit, if I were a ghost, I wouldn't go to somebody like you, Tony, you know, hard-hearted. I'd go to Rod here, you know, all kidding aside, though. I would go to somebody like Rod, and that's unusual because men aren't really that sensitive to begin with. They would rather go to a woman, you know, because they're naturally more sensitive. I hate to say that, guys, but it's the truth.
Women are more sensitive than men.
That's the way it
Yes,
is,
they
you know.
are, definitely.
But he has a great interest in Indian folklore and everything, too. You know, if you went into Rod's house here, you would see all kinds of Indian artifacts and everything. And when I first met Rod, I realized that he did have this sensitivity. But what really got to me was the time we went to his home the first time.
Yeah.
And he said to Lorraine, "Do you want to go flying with me?" I said, "Flying?" I said, "Well, can I go too?" "Well, you're not ready, Ed. Not yet."
Really?
Yeah, it would have been
Well,
hard for me to get off the ground.
What
so,
happened?
you know.
Can you, somebody explain to
I
me what
guess
you meant?
it's
What that
astral
was?
kind of travel.
They never
but-
did tell me where they flew to.
It happened to me. I went on a vacation about 11 years ago. I went out to visit all the canyons out west. And I had met someone in between, I think it was in between Bryce and Zion Canyon. We stopped in a restaurant, and there was a woman there, and we were talking, and she said she wanted to do a reading or something on me. And I was like, okay, why not? You know, and she held my hands, and we went out on this like patio, and we just held hands. And in doing that, I was getting visions that we were above the ground, sort of flying. I felt like hawk-like that. And all of a sudden, this woman let go of my hands real fast and said, "I can't do this anymore, you're scaring me."
She said that.
She said that. Now, this was the woman who was supposed to be reading me. And you know, to me, it was a great feeling. And that's what Lorraine is talking about. I held her hands and just visualized flying, and she could feel the same thing of the feeling of flight.
Like,
Shaman can do this, you know.
That is nice.
it is. It's
Yeah.
very beautiful. Tony, there